Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts.
Welcome back. If you listened to us last week, you would have heard we've been travelling for work. And next week, we're going to be able to give you all the details of our travels with some tips of what you can expect if you're going to either the Middle East or Scandinavia.
Yeah, can't wait to tell you about what I discovered in Egypt and Saudi Arabia. But this week, we're discussing Agoda's Travel Bugbears survey, which reveals our top in-flight peeves.
And top of the list for Australian travellers are, not surprisingly, people who invade your personal space. Wait for this one. Passing wind and kicking off shoes to reveal stinky socks. So those are all definitely top of my list. And I can't say I've ever had the smelly socks experience, but I've definitely had the farting one, which I know you didn't want me to use that word. But I might have actually blocked it out because I think it was a bit too traumatic to remember.
Oh my goodness, I've had the wind problem too, not me personally, but I have to say, try sitting on a flight to Dublin on New Year's Day. It is not pretty. There is no word for a collective hangover, but it was rank. It was revolting. So, and I've had heaps of stinky sock things. So the survey peeves include flight delays. Of course, nobody loves a flight delay. And the dread of sitting near a crying baby. Having travelled a lot with a baby, I really feel for people in this situation. My baby never cried, ever, really. She was just too lazy to cry. But, it's such a nightmare if you're on a long haul. And even worse, when one baby sets one off and triggers them all. I have to say, I was with a parents who had two young babies, and one started crying and then the other one started crying. And somebody said, I think it's her ears. You have never seen so many bottles of Phenergan and Panadol shoot up. I swear to God, it was like a forest of arms of people waving drugs for these children. It was quite astonishing.
Like coughing. It seems when someone coughs, everybody coughs, and then there just seems to be a procession of coughing. And that always happens in trains too. I hate that. The survey also found more broadly across Asia Pacific, invasion of personal space is the number one pet peeve for flyers. I was on a flight once when the person next to me was asleep, and he kept sort of sliding and leaning on me. And I would just try and move, which was giving me, backache. But when I'd move, he'd just sort of take up more, because he was asleep, he would just sort of keep taking up more of my space. Oh my God, it was just a horrible situation to be in, quite literally.
Yeah.
And also, what about those people that take up both armrests? So rude.
Oh my God, I end up in fights. I'm shocking. That's my real estate man.
And of course, flight delays came in second on the list of passengers' grievances.
Yeah, and the third biggest in-flight annoyance for the Asia-Pacific market is loud passengers, over-chatty seatmates, couples airing their dirty laundry in public, or raucous groups broadcasting their music or games across the entire flight. I did a flight recently where the parents put Baby Shark on their kid's phone with no headphones.
Oh, no.
I know. It played 11 times before we even took off, because I was actually counting it. I was like, are you for real? And I thought, I'm going to have to say something. But I think that what happened was then we took off, and of course they didn't have Wi-Fi, and they thought they're not going to pay for Wi-Fi for a kid to listen to Baby Shark.
Yeah, there's only so much headphones can block out.
Yeah, it's a bit of a slow-boiled frog scenario, because seats have been shrinking in economy so much that we just sort of keep putting up with the latest imposition.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. So Forbes actually ran a story saying back in the 80s, the seat pitch, which is that space between your seat and the one in front of you, used to range from 31 to 35 inches, and now it's as little as 28. So we're not really imagining it. The seats are actually shrinking. And meanwhile, on the flip side, we're getting larger. So no wonder personal space is a bit of an issue. And it's just sort of sadly a bit unavoidable. But yeah, I literally sit in my seat and watch passengers come down and just pray for a good neighbour. You know how when you've got your own already, you're
everybody
first,
does that,
and you're sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, and then you get a really good person and you just...
I know, because I'm always the last one on the flight. You see, so I glance down and I'm looking at the seats going...
I'm always early, and so, and I'm sitting there just thinking, please, just begging, praying for, someone who's, a decent neighbour.
To win the lottery.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when you get the row to yourself, It's the poor woman's business class, as we call it here. I had a 3-seat sweep on 2 of my 3 flights coming back from Turkey recently of all airlines, popular Emirates. I know, right?
So lucky.
I mean, the first one was a local flight within Turkey, and then I slept down to Dubai. It was incredible, amazing, so good.
You're listening to The World Awaits. Subscribe through our website at theworldawaits.au.
This week, my guest is author and wine writer for the Financial Review, Max Allen, whose new book, Alternative Reality, explores the new grape varieties we're now drinking in Australia. And for travellers, the book includes the best cellar doors and wine regions to visit if you want to explore past that unholy trinity of Shiraz, Chardonnay and Sauvignon Blanc. Take a listen. Hello, Max, and welcome to The World Awaits.
Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on your new book, Alternative Reality, How Wine Changed Course. It's a book that you co-wrote with the Australian Alternative Varieties Wine Show, which is held in Mildura every month. And I think it's really interesting because Australian, as you were saying in the book, Australian wine has been through a revolution over the last 2 decades, from what we drink, how we drink it, and interestingly for travellers, where that wine comes from. So just to paint us a picture of the wine landscape as it stands at the moment. I mean, are we all just mainlining Shiraz and Sauvignon Blanc? Is that what's going down?
Look, if you look at the figures, if you look at the stats, then yes, that's exactly what's happening. You know, Chardonnay, Shiraz, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet, all of those varieties are still very much the most widely planted. So when you, particularly up there, particularly around Mildura, you know, along the Murray River, and in some of the larger regions, yes, those varieties are still the mainstream, if you like. But what's different from so the book came out of the fact that the show that you just mentioned, the Alternative Varieties Wine Show, was 21 years old in 2021, and they wanted to, you know, mark it by writing or commissioning me to write the history of the show, because what's changed in those 21 years, even though back then Chardonnay, Shiraz, Cabernet were also dominant, there was far fewer other varieties grown in Australia. Now there's 150 plus. Like, there's all these varieties that if you walk into a bottle shop now or a cellar door, depending on where you are in the country, you're just going to get so much more choice about the kind of wines that are made in Australia now than we did 21 years ago. And it was really worth celebrating that.
Oh, fantastic! So, if that change is on us, what sort of wines are we drinking outside those big guns? I mean, save me from the Savalanche, I've got to say. What where are we going to now?
I can't save you. You're going to have to save yourself. You can't rely on me to do that.
I can say no. It's okay. I can say no.
Well, you know, what you could do is buy a copy. I mean, it's ridiculous plugging here of the book.
Plug away.
One of the most important things of the book is not just the history of the show, but also there's a list at the back of those other varieties, like the main 50 or so that are the alternatives. Start in the A's and work your way through to the Z's, and you will discover so many new flavours. So what's fascinating for me is during that 21-year period, some of the varieties that when we started the show, or when the show was started in 1999, 2000, 2001, that kind of time, there were varieties that were only just beginning to emerge, that were only planted in a handful of varieties that are now mainstream. So they've kind of graduated from being niche and quirky and odd into becoming everyday. So Pinot Grigio, that variety, when the show started, was still very much an alternative. Now I think it's the 4th or 5th most widely planted grape in Australia. Amazing. It's extraordinary. And the other one, of course, that we're all, you know, sculling with abandon, even though I couldn't possibly advocate that, is Prosecco.
I was about to say it had to be Prosecco.
It's Prosecco.
Oh,
it's
sorry, that's my fault, actually.
Once again, I can't help you. But the that's been fascinating to watch. So the first Prosecco wasn't even grown in Australia when this show started, and it went from being a small producer, one or two small producers, one in particular in the King Valley in northeast Victoria, who originally came from that part of Italy, right? So there's a lot of Italian migrants growing grapes in Australia right across the country. And this particular grower, Otto Del Zotto, said, I want to make sparkling wine, Prosecco, like I remember from my homeland. He sourced some cuttings, he propagated them, he planted the grapevines. It was successful. Other people looked at him and went, people really love this wine, Prosecco, we should plant that too. And suddenly, within 10 years, it's extraordinary, this change. Within 10 years, it becomes a mainstream sparkling wine that is a household word for wine drinkers across the country. I think being able to witness that kind of change has been a real privilege for me over the last, 20 or so years.
I've got to say, Del Zotto was one of, you've pipped me on my own questions because I was going to say, for travellers, the final section of the book is a piece of travel gold, where you list the different types of grapes and the vineyards who are producing them. So you could actually create your own driving map, or maybe get somebody else to drive you. And one of those places was to go to the King Valley in northeastern Victoria along what's now dubbed the Prosecco Road, which has been a great piece of marketing. And so that, as you say, that's now a mainstream, and you might find it in my fridge fairly regularly as well. What do you see us drinking in the years ahead? So which wine regions should we be getting into our cars to explore for these alternative varieties?
One of the most fabulous things is not just that these grape varieties become popular, but as you say, they become associated with the region. So it took 150 years for the Hunter Valley to become, well, it took less time than that, but over that 150-year history or more in the Hunter Valley, Semillon, white Semillon, which is beautifully crisp and seafood friendly when it's young, and then ages in the bottle to this kind of golden, toasty, delicious, complex white wine. Now, the Hunter Valley is recognised worldwide as being the best and possibly the only place where that style of wine is made because of history, culture, soil, climate, all those things. I think that's for a wine tourist. It's finding those varietal specializations in regions that is one of the main drivers for going there in the first place, right? So when I go to the Hunter, I love to drink fresh young Semillon with oysters or something like that, or seafood. You're not that far from Newcastle, you're not that far from the ocean, but there's also the beautiful earthy Shirazes that grow in the region, which are unlike wine from anywhere else in the world. So these incredibly regional wine grape variety style connections. What's fascinating now is that we're seeing those destination varieties, if you like, emerging within 10 years. So I was in McLaren Vale just last week in South Australia, and McLaren Vale everybody knows because they've been doing it for 100 plus years. Shiraz, Grenache has been grown there for over 100 years and is really trendy at the moment, but those are well established wines. What McLaren Vale has never really been able to cut through with is a white grape that it can call its own, right? Because it's a very distinctive warm climate, kind of Mediterranean climate. It's not really great for Chardonnay down there. They grow a lot of Sauvignon Blanc, but it's not the best place to grow Sauvignon Blanc. That's up in the hills, half an hour away up in the Adelaide Hills. What they've found is there's a grape variety called Fiano, and the Italian white grape Fiano grows really well in McLaren Vale, produces a wine that people love to drink. It's kind of crisp and fresh, but also has lots of fruit flavour as well. And it's becoming McLaren Vale's white wine. And it's becoming the kind of wine that cellar door visitors go to McLaren Vale and say, have you got a Fiano? I want to try your Fiano. That's taken less than 20 years. Amazing. It's amazing that those kind of cultural changes happen.
And what I love about it, is the geographic connections that you've started to pull there, or which is, we're looking abroad at places, and part of this change comes from things like the change in climate change is real, and that's affecting the way that we drink. But then we are traditionally a hot, dry climate in Australia. Let's not go down to the microclimates, but So we're looking at places that have got similar climates in the old world, if you like, and bringing those wine varieties to them. So, we're going to Turkey and we're going to, to the hotter parts of Italy, places that, traditionally maybe the French wines. France has such a different climate. There are so many different climates within France, but Australia is so many light years away that we're going to different countries to explore their wines and bring them back to Australia to see how that they'll sit in ours. Vermentino is a great example of that. Grown in Corsica for ages, and I kept tipping Vermentino to be the new best thing. I was like, this is going to be your summer drink, and I think I wrote that years ago. I was up in Mildura, coincidentally, about 5 years ago, pulled a houseboat up to a cellar door, which I think there's no greater way to get a cellar door, and discovered Vermentino. And my epiphany is years behind yours, but it was an epiphany. Is that going to be something that we're going to see more of stocked in our bottle shops?
It already is. But Vermentino and Fiano, two very similar grapes, as in they're very well adapted to those warmer climates, as you say. What Fiano has that seems to be just pipping Vermentino at the post of popularity is it's just got a little bit more weight. It's got a bit more fruit. So if, as you've already said, we love our Sauvignon Blanc in Australia. We love our Chardonnay, and Fiano is far more akin to Sauvignon Blanc in that respect. Vermentino is much more like the Hunter Semillon that I said before. It's a seafood white, right? So if you're on the Murray and it's a hot day, houseboat, yabbies, I don't know, something really kind of that archetypal inland Australian experience.
Oh, you're singing to me.
Vermentino is what you want to be drinking. That's going to be the one that really kind of is... And it is particularly well suited to probably a warmer climate than McLaren Vale. What's fascinating, so the show itself came out of a push from grape growers, Stefano De Pieri, the chef up there in Mildura, and a number of other wine people who were saying climate change is coming. This is back in the late 90s. Climate change is coming. It's here. We need to be thinking about these climate adaptive varieties, and a lot of the push came for the varieties that we've already mentioned, which tend to be southern Mediterranean varieties. Tempranillo in Spain is very popular now. From Spain, is very popular now for those reasons. But what's happened in subsequent years is that the cooler climate regions, like the Adelaide Hills, have gone, but what about us? Why can't we have one of these alternative varieties? And what they've done is they've found a specialisation for an Austrian grape variety called Grüner Veltliner.
Oh my goodness, love it, go on.
It's like Riesling, but with a bit more of the kind of, mineral, intensity. It's kind of like the freshness and line and focus of Riesling, but with the kind of body, a little bit more of the body of a Chardonnay. So it kind of ticks both of those boxes. Really well suited to the Adelaide Hills, and is becoming one of those destination varieties that I spoke about before. So it's not just the cool climate, it's not just the warm climate, it's also the cooler climate regions that have got some really good potential by diversifying their offering, if you like.
Oh, I think that's fantastic. I've got to say I'm a big Grüner Veltliner fan, and going into the bars attached to the vineyards in Austria, and especially around the outskirts of Vienna, there is a compulsion to eat an inordinate amount of ham, and put it away with your Grüner Veltliner. There's nothing wrong with that, and I guess going back again to that great little section in the back of the book where you list the grape varieties, and then you link who's actually producing them. So who would be some of the Adelaide Hills cellar doors that you'd be heading to for a little Grüner Veltliner here?
Pretty much any of them. I think there's 40 growers now or something ridiculous in the Adelaide Hills, something like that. I think it's one of those varieties that's really done incredibly well in a relatively short amount of time. But one of the leaders of that push was Hahndorf Hill, and Hahndorf Hill. I think they were the first to grow Gruner in the hills, certainly in the hills, and they have 2 or 3. One of which is a blend which is a blend of Gruner, Riesling, Gewürz, Pinot Gris, other things like that, that is modelled on those wines that you just mentioned. So those Öhrigen, I think they're called, the wine houses outside Vienna, which are surrounded by these vineyards. Those vineyards are often full of lots of different grape varieties that they pick together and make a wine called gemischte Satz. Is that right? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
No, please don't ask me on the pronunciation. I defer to you, Max, with this one.
Which is mixed white, right? So it's kind of like the house white of the vineyards around and those places are pretty big, right? I mean, they're almost beer barn kind of size. Well, certainly the ones that I've visited in Vienna.
Yeah.
And so I think Harndorf would be my best spot to start. What I love about what Larry Jacobs and the crew at Harndorf are doing is that they're the ones that have been promoting others in the region to plant with this kind of, the more of us there are, the better it is for everybody, right? Because it gives tourists a reason to go up. That isn't just Chardonnay and Pinot Noir and Sauvignon Blanc. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's a great region for those varieties and cool climate Shiraz, no question. And a lot of other cooler climate white grapes like Arnais, which is originally a white grape from Piedmont in Italy, does really well in the hills. But the Gruner is kind of becoming, there's the Prosecco Road that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You've got this Gruner, and that generosity of spirit that Larry had to promote and help other people to plant Gruner. And he's not the only one. There's a lot of people in the industry that are like that. I think it's one of the really, it's not uniquely Australian, and in fact Larry's not Australian, he's South African, but he's been in Australia and he's an Australian wine grower now. It's a really important part of the Australian wine industry, is this kind of competitive collaboration or collaborative competition, whatever the phrase is, and that's very much at the heart of what the show has always been about for the last 23 years, is to really get people together to encourage each other to be better at what they're doing and to diversify in the vineyard.
And it can only be a benefit for the rest of us as well. I mean, and all of these regions that we're talking about, most of them also are exceptional food regions, and that's another reason why we've changed how we're drinking and what we're drinking, is because of what we're eating as well. We're not doing the big heavy English stodge or classic French dishes anymore. We're trying to find what's a wine that goes with a beautiful light Vietnamese noodle dish or something like that. So that's also another reason why we've changed what we're drinking too. And these, of course, wine and food in Australia, we're so lucky that when we go to these areas, we can also eat ourselves into an absolute coma. Just if we've spent a lot on the white side of it, on the reds, I was up in northeast Victoria, just outside Bright recently, and I was drinking a Saperavi, a Georgian wine, which I thought was amazing. The only other time I'd drunk it, I think I was in Georgia, literally, as in the ex-Soviet country, not the US state, and I could see the excitement on the winemakers' faces as they were saying, "You should try this. This is going to blow your mind." And I think that those experiences are something great for the Australian industry. Where would you go for really unusual reds? And because I think in the book you suggest that we're going for much lighter reds rather than the big loaded Barossa Shirazes that we've grown up with.
You'll find this kind of alternative wine revolution pretty much in every region to a greater or lesser degree. So McLaren Vale, partly because, which I mentioned before, in South Australia is a particularly interesting area for them, partly because it's got a climate that's so well suited to a lot of these warmer climate varieties, but also it's got a history of innovation and being adventurous. So people like Coriol, who first planted Sangiovese back in the 1980s, so really ahead of the curve. Now I was there for a very, very good lunch. Actually, if anybody's looking for somewhere to have lunch in McLaren Vale, I can recommend Coriol.
Okay.
Is among many other places. It's now their top-selling wine of all the wines that they sell, and something like 50% of everything they make is not Shiraz or Grenache, the old French, or not the Grenache is originally French, but we think of it as French. So that has taken 35 or so years more for that particular winery, which is, of course, influences other people. But honestly, every region you go to, I'm just trying to think, some of the cooler climate regions in southern Victoria, as well as Chardonnay Pinot Noir, which is what you'd expect to find. You'll find Pinot Meunier. Now, Pinot Meunier is a really interesting grape. You think of it normally as the kind of the third wheel of champagne.
You have sparklings, yeah.
Yeah, right. But here in Australia, for 150 plus years, it's also been made into a red wine, because it's one of those historical wine styles, and it makes a wine that is a little bit like Pinot, but is a bit kind of earthier and a bit, I don't know, it's like Pinot but not quite. It's like Pinot that's slightly out of register, it's kind of got other flavours in it. So I'm just trying to think. You name a region and I'll tell you what kind of alternative grape varieties to look for.
Oh, okay. I'm going to go weird and say the Ngambie Lakes in Victoria, 90 minutes north of Melbourne.
Now, that's a leading question, because you probably know that Marsanne is the white grape that everybody associates with Ngambie, the Goulburn Valley in central Victoria, because historically it's been grown there by Tabilk, the most famous example since the 1860s, which is actually a point worth mentioning. A lot of these grape varieties that we've spoken about before are new to Australia. So Fiano Vermentino, as far as I'm aware, certainly Fiano, there was no planting material available in Australia before the late 90s, early 2000s. Marsanne has been grown here, as I say, since the beginning, so the early 19th century. And this new interest in alternative grape varieties has actually inspired a lot of growers to look at their old vineyards and go, okay, well, maybe we've got something here that we've actually been growing for generations that we haven't given enough credit to. And Grenache is one of those. So even though it's not an alternative variety by any means, because it's been grown here for so long, it's so widely planted, there's so much of it relatively across the country around, Grenache is now really trendy and is producing some fabulous wines, because winemakers said to themselves, what else can we look at? What else can we play with apart from the Shiraz in our backyard? Other varieties, Chenin Blanc. So if you go over to Western Australia, for example, Margaret River, Swan Valley, down through Margaret River particularly, Chenin Blanc, which has, again, very old history, really kind of overlooked as being a fairly simple wine and something you put in a blend with other grape varieties. There's some producers in Margaret River now that are producing the most fantastic Chenin Blanc, because around the world, in France particularly, but also South Africa, Chenin Blanc is incredibly highly regarded, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't have that reputation here. I was in Paris recently drinking Chenin Blanc, and to me it was a revelation. It was like, oh hey, like hello old friend. It was
beautiful wines.
Yeah,
yes,
really astonishing. I'm just so enjoying this virtual rip through Australia's wine regions. I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, Max, tell us, what is your most bizarre travel experience?
It's not Australia, it's Sicily.
Okay. That's okay.
So I was in Sicily a few years ago with my wife and some friends, and we were based in Catania for a few days. And before we went up to Taormina, which is where, obviously all the tourists go, because it's going close to Etna, and we travelled on Etna. But staying in Catania, we were there around Easter, and we went up into the hills to a hilltop medieval town called Paternò to watch the Easter parade. So, those incredibly ancient rituals of crowds of people carrying the effigy of the Virgin Mary down these incredibly steep winding steps, that kind of...
Love it.
Unbelievable. And we were determined to get back to Catania before night fell. Unfortunately, we were late. So there was 5 of us crammed into this tiny little Fiat. The Sicilian guy was driving. Sicilian family friend of ours was driving. He said, "Don't worry, I know the way back."
What could possibly go wrong?
Put Google into and we're going down, and Google Maps was taking us down these dark little laneways, and we were struggling to get up the hill. Are we going to make it? Are we just getting a bit hysterical in the back? And we turned down this laneway, and in front of us in the headlights, there's like a car with a couple of skies outside and the lights on in the car, and we're thinking we're stuck in the middle of the countryside in Sicily. Nobody knows we're here. We're out of signal. We managed to get back to Catania, unfortunately, because we were hysterical, and find somewhere to eat some beautiful donkey and drink Nerello Mascalese, which is the next grape variety, which is about to be released in Australia, which is going to be really exciting.
Really? Is that it? So your most bizarre experience is actually discovering the next grape variety.
It's all about the wine.
It's all about the wine. Max, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a delight, and we will put details of the book on our show notes, which you can see on the website. And thanks for the hot tip as well. I can't wait to get in the car. Hopefully, not get lost in the dark. Thanks again, Max, for joining us.
Thank you.
Wow, that's definitely going to get me exploring at the bottle shop. And Max's book, again, is Alternative Reality, How Australia Wine Changed Course, published by Melbourne Books. Take a look at melbournebooks.com.au to order your copy.
Our tip this week is about using artificial intelligence for your travel plans. Euromonitor International's travel research expert says, and I quote, ChatGPT is taking travel and the world by storm. It found nearly 98% of travel executives expect AI to have an impact on their industry, meaning they expect almost all of us to use it for bookings in the future. So I don't get it, Kirsty. How do we use AI for bookings?
Well, it means things like ChatGPT can help you plan your trips, acting like a virtual travel assistant, so delivering relevant results for hotels, flights, what to do on the destination. And Carolyn Bremner, Head of Travel and Tourism Research at Euromonitor International, says it comes down to convenience and 24/7 accessibility, because we can access AI tools like ChatGPT from our smartphones and our computers and from anywhere with an internet connection.
Yeah, I mean, already a lot of travel companies are jumping on board. We're talking Expedia, Kayak, OpenTable, TripAdvisor, and even Klook. So does that mean we're out of a job, Kirsty? Or is this the death of the travel agent?
I don't know about us being out of a job, or travel agents being out of the job either. But Bremner does warn that the path of AI adoption isn't going to run entirely smoothly, and there are major concerns over consumer privacy, with countries like Italy temporarily banning it. And there are also concerns over AI being reliant on out-of-date internet knowledge, with a lag of 2 years in the case of ChatGPT, with no access to current events or real-time information.
Yeah, wow, that is quite a lag. Another risk of relying on ChatGPT is that everything will become increasingly generic, leading to a loss of authenticity for destinations and travel experiences. You know, top 5 things to do in Paris: Eiffel Tower, Arc de Triomphe, Louvre, you know, these very, as we say, very generic itineraries.
I'm not a user of it, and I just have concerns if anyone was to use it to file travel stories, for example, because of exactly sort of that reason. And you risk major factual errors, and also the language does become, as we already talked about, very generic. So I really love it when you can hear the tone of a good writer's voice in a story. When you're reading a story about travel for travellers, people that love reading about travel, it's not, it's good to hear that emotive voice, and you're not going to get that emotion and that emotive voice through ChatGPT. And bring it back to travel planning, I think it's the same thing. I just don't know that you can actually trust it.
So, yeah, basically it's all just still very new, if you want to use it as a base for generic ideas, it can be good for saying something like, what are the best sites to see in Argentina? It'll give you a great list of very specific things you can do. But yeah, I wouldn't rely on it solely. And you never do with travel planning anyway. You're always picking and mixing from different sources anyway. Yeah.
Look, on the plus side, I guess it's definitely quicker than hunting through Google. So you can save some time, but our tip is it's definitely going to help you plan your travel adventure, but bear in mind it's not going to be 100% accurate, so you need to verify what you'll find. And maybe if you're really unsure about what to do, it might just, if anything, it'll just prompt some ideas for you.
Yeah, and like any new technology, it's a matter of watch this space, right?
Absolutely.
This week, I had a chat to Matt Lewis, Director of Hand-Picked Luxury Accommodation View Retreats, and he's also a life coach, about the rise in demand for wellness escapes and why it's more important now than ever. Welcome to the show, Matt.
Well, thanks so much for having me, Kirsty. It's great to catch up again.
Let's start by tell everyone a little bit about how you got into the travel business and a little bit about your business, View Retreats.
Right, so I started my career in hospitality, actually, here at the old Hyatt Regency in Adelaide. Firstly working as a cocktail bar attendant, then a valet, porter, front desk. Then after a while, I was tired of working all of the, long nights and 7-day rosters, and I transitioned into being a travel agent, initially working with STA Travel. I was with STA Travel for many years and actually ended up over in their global head office in the UK, working across all of their different trading divisions before coming back to Australia and moving into the tour operator space, working with Geckos and Peregrine Adventures back in the day, and then Intrepid Travel a bit later on. And it was after that that my partner, who's also in the travel industry, and I decided to launch View Retreats. So we were having a little relaxing getaway at a stunning luxury holiday home in Daylesford. And we started chatting to the owner about the fact that there were no booking platforms that just featured the best of the best accommodation. Something where our properties were actually reviewed and hand-picked, as opposed to the big booking sites where there's no quality control and anybody can list. So we decided to build it ourselves. So fast forward to now, and we've been around for 10 years now. We have over 5,000 luxury getaways, hand-picked luxury getaways on our website. And we've also just launched a new range of wellness holidays as well.
Fantastic. Right, well, it'll be great to focus on that too, because it's such a big growth area. Is that why, obviously, that you've moved sort of into that area? And what does it mean by when you say launching those luxury wellness holidays? What does that mean? Are those properties that have a very specific wellness focus?
Yeah, it absolutely is, but it's a little bit more than that, really, because these are actually itineraries where you visit 2 or 3 different places. They're kind of a combination of discovery and recovery, if you like. So a little bit of sightseeing and seeing a few of the major sites at the destination, but then also spending time in a dedicated wellness resort. So you get the best of both worlds. What we found, Kirsty, with a lot of wellness programs, and wellness is a very broad term, right? And wellness means different things to different people. So we've been bandying these sort of terms around the office recently, and we've sort of come up with these terms of hardcore wellness and soft wellness. They're only working terms, but more hardcore wellness, if you like, we see as sitting under a Bodhi tree and meditating for 10 days and, having a detox and that sort of thing. So a very strict schedule of activities in one destination. Whereas for other people, wellness is all about balance, and it's about time and space and reconnecting with nature, reconnecting with each other, maybe doing a little bit of yoga, but maybe also spending time by the pool, drinking a Bloody Mary and reading a book. So what we've done with our holidays is really create something that's quite flexible, that allows people to find their own balance and work out what wellness is for them.
Great. What are some of the new ones that maybe people might not have thought about or heard of in either of those extremes? Not that they're extremes. The balance obviously one is sounds like a lovely balanced offering. But what is in those 2 categories? I guess what is maybe some of the ones that people either might not have heard of, places they never would have thought of going, or experiences they may never have imagined possible?
Well, one of the ones that I love at the moment, and I was going to call it a hidden gem, it's not really so hidden. Sri Lanka, for example, is one of my favourite destinations where we've just launched a wellness holiday, and it goes into the cultural heart of Sri Lanka. You see some really amazing sights, but then you also go to this mountain top wellness retreat, and there you can choose to be involved in daily walks and yoga and meditation, and there's massages included, and everything that you can want is kind of there, and it allows you, there's no TVs and there's no mobile phone coverage, which for some people would be a nightmare, but for me that's my idea of a dream holiday, stepping away from the computer and the phones. And I think that's the thing at the moment. Everybody is so so stressed. There's a lot of stress and anxiety in our world today, and I think this is really the counterbalance to that. So allowing people to step away from their busy life, to have that downtime, and just to reconnect with each other and the world around them.
And is that what you're seeing? I mean, obviously launching into this area, are you seeing real demand from people who are just feeling really stressed out? I mean, that's, in a way, it's sort of surprising, isn't it, given most of us are actually working from home still, or at least part of the time?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely spot on. One of the things you might not know about me, Kirsty, is that I'm also a qualified life coach. So I run my own coaching business as well as the travel business. And I've done that for the last 10 years. And one of the things that I see in my coaching practice frequently and often is the effects of stress and anxiety due to our fast-paced lives. And this has really only gotten worse since the COVID lockdowns. And I think it's that connection, that people are working from home, and that's true. And in many ways that reduces a lot of stresses. In some ways it actually increases the stresses, and it increases that detachment from the world and the people around us. And I mean, there's some stats out there, from the World Health Organization and others that, anxiety and depression, which were already very high before COVID, have just gone off the charts since the COVID lockdowns worldwide. And that's certainly my experience in my coaching practice. So I guess this is sort of a response to that in the travel business, that here's this area where there's these strong desires for people to step away, to have some downtime, to be able to get away from the endless scrolling on TikTok, on Instagram, whatever it may be, and actually to live a more, simple and holistic life. And I guess that's what we're seeing. That's what we're seeing in the market. That's what we're seeing with our customers. And that's what we were really responding to with this new range of wellness holidays.
And it's a really good point, because obviously the lines get quite blurred when you are working from home.
Yes.
Yeah. And I guess that sort of brings it back to where the locations people are looking for, like mentioning Sri Lanka, because that's also removing you from the culture that you're used to and from your entire environment. Is that something do you think that's why Sri Lanka, and what are some of the other areas that are sort of, or places that are in demand? And do you think that people are particularly seeking maybe something where they're getting that cultural experience or just change?
Yes, You're spot on. You're absolutely spot on. So we've launched the holidays in Bali, Vietnam, Thailand, Cambodia, and Sri Lanka. So some of our favorite destinations across Southeast Asia. And I think you're absolutely right. One of the biggest things for me with traveling, one of my biggest motivations for traveling, is that change, that difference of culture where everything around you is new. It kind of forces your mind into a different perspective. You have a different perspective on your life back home. You can maybe see things a little bit differently. You open your mind a little bit to different ways of living, of being, of working. And I think that's absolutely part of the benefit of this. So it's as much about giving people a cultural experience immersed in the local culture and new natural environments, and a chance to actually then reconnect with what's important in life.
And are you seeing sort of demand for people or interest from learnings that they can then take home? Because the thing is, it's all very well to go on a lovely luxury wellness holiday, and I have done quite a few of them myself. But, I've been on a couple where I've been taught things like how to activate your vagus nerve, and that's always stayed with me. And is that something that you think people are also looking for, sort of some learnings that they can then take and practice at home?
Yes, yeah, I think so. And that's why the stay at the dedicated wellness resort is really, really amazing for that purpose, really. You can train with experts, you can go to masterclasses, but also, if you don't want to, you don't have to. So you can be as much involved in that sort of stuff as you want, or not. So we allow everybody, a lot of wellness retreats have a reputation for having a really strict schedule, and you must be up at this time and do this and go to this class and this workshop. And those things are all available, breath work, creative classes and artwork, and, all of these Tai Chi classes, different things that you may want to be involved in and then you may want to learn more about to take back to your life. But there's no obligation to do that.
And where exactly, so tell us a bit more about exactly where some of these places are. Whereabouts exactly are they? Within Sri Lanka or Thailand or Cambodia or those other places you mentioned?
Yes, well, I'll start with Cambodia because you may remember that we lived in Cambodia for about 5 years before the COVID pandemic. So it's got a special little place in our heart. It's our second home. And so the Cambodia itinerary starts with a couple of days in Phnom Penh at the arrival city. Then we head up to Siem Reap, where you really get immersed in, the Angkor Empire and Angkor Wat and all of the beautiful temples and the spirituality of Sri Lanka. Of Siem Reap. And then you go down to the islands, and the Cambodian islands are beautiful, stunning. People often say, they're like the Thai islands 20 years ago. And you can really get a chance to relax and reset down in the Cambodian Riviera. In Bali, it's a combination of both Bali and the Gili Islands. So getting off of Bali and getting away from the busyness of Bali and heading out to Gili and doing some snorkeling and diving out there and really reconnecting with nature before coming back to the jungles of Ubud. Again, another one of our favourite places. Ubud for the wellness side of things. In Vietnam, there's two different itineraries, one that goes up into the mountains of Sapa and the other that is more along the coast and in Halong and Lan Ha Bay. And in Thailand, we go from Bangkok up to the Golden Triangle, to an elephant camp up there, which is really stunning, and then down to Phuket for our wellness resort.
A lot of nature immersion and
yes,
which is obviously increasingly important. And do you think, what are your thoughts on sort of what the future of wellness, given you're both seeing it and you have vast experience in it in both your life coaching business and in the travel sector. What are you thinking about? What do you think the future of wellness and travel might look like?
Well, as we said, wellness is such a broad term, and it really means different things to different people in different contexts. So I think we'll see a continuing of a trend that's already underway with most big hotels and resorts, and plenty of smaller ones too, are integrating wellness services and facilities as a core part of their primary offering. Think Avolo with their plant-based menus and some of the big chains with their lifestyle and wellness positioning brands. So in essence, I think we'll see wellness in all its forms just becoming an essential part of everyday travel. There'll certainly still be specialists, but I think that we'll just see it continue to permeate through all areas of the travel industry.
Yeah, definitely, and it's it's certainly a type of travel that I particularly enjoy, and for most people, I guess when they travel, even if you're an adventure traveller, there's an element of wellness even involved in adventure travel because because I always find that going out hiking and you're connecting with nature. So
absolutely, that's a big. You're hiking, you're walking, you're kayaking, you're doing all of those physical activity things, which are absolutely part of wellness.
And a good balance with when you're living like you are in a place like Barossa and drinking lots of lovely wine.
Then we have to focus on the wellness. Yes, it's essential. You're absolutely right.
Look, it's been so great chatting with you today. At the end of all of our interviews, we ask this question. So I'm going to hit you up here. What's the most bizarre thing that's ever happened to you on your travels?
Well, I kind of knew that this question was coming, Kirsty. I was thinking about all of the bizarre things that have happened to me on my travels. And there's so many bizarre stories, some of which are not really appropriate to share. But I was thinking about one of the more recent ones when we were in Cambodia and we went down to Koh Rong San Lom, beautiful little island down there. And unbeknownst to us, the resort that we'd booked was actually over the other side of the island to where the ferry arrives, and there's no roads or anything on the island. You actually have to go through the center of the island, the mountainous jungle, that takes you over to the other side. It's about a 45-minute trek, and it's quite it's quite manageable when the weather conditions are fine. And they were fine when we arrived. But of course, within only about 10 or 15 minutes of us taking this, hike up this mountainous trail in the jungle with our backpacks on over to the resort that we were going to. Suddenly a storm came in, and it wasn't just any old storm. It was just this crazy downpour like you get in the tropics. And suddenly we're in treacherous rain. There's waterfalls that are starting to come down the path that we're on. We've got all of our belongings in, our backpacks on. But we knew that we were that the resort was some sort of remote. So we had wine. We had 2 bottles of wine with us because we had bought that with us. We had our computers in our backpacks. So suddenly we're trying to keep our computers dry. We're trying to keep our wine from breaking whilst walking on thongs on this treacherous waterfall. This trail that had now become a waterfall. So the good news is we did make it to the resort at the end of the trip with the wine intact because we really needed the wine. That was the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was one of our more bizarre stories.
Oh, well, I'm glad the wine made it, even if the computers didn't. Look, it's been so great. Thank you so much for your time today, Matt.
That was Matt Lewis of View Retreats. You can learn more at viewretreats.com.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram. That's Kirstie Writes, WRITES. And where can people find you, Belle?
You can find me at globalsalsa.com or on Insta at global_salsa.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.